right, 9.1b, I can order fractions and mixed numbers. So like if you get some fractions, you can figure out which one's bigger, smaller, put them in order. Now I'm going to show you some different strategies for how to do it, and some problems lend themselves better to one strategy versus a different strategy. But feel free to do the one that you feel like works best for you. We'll go through the problem and I'll show you them as we go. So 3 students record the distance they live from school. How can you determine who lives the farthest from school? So essentially, which one of these is the biggest? Vera lives 19/8 miles, Renzo lives 10/4 miles, and Layla lives 2 1/8. Now, we generally wouldn't see a distance written as an improper fraction. We might see it as a mixed number, or perhaps with a decimal, which I'll go over this time, or this lesson. So, what strategy will we use? Well, the first strategy we can use is we can find a common denominator. So in your notes, go ahead and just write find a common denominator as strategy number 1. So that's the one we'll go over first. It'll definitely connect to when we add and subtract, because we always find a common denominator when we add and subtract fractions. So you have lots of practice space where you can write down what I'm doing so that you have examples to look back at. So how would we write these fractions with a common denominator? Like, what does that mean? So if we look and we say, okay, well, we have 8s, 4ths, and 4ths. Oh, sorry, 8s, 4ths, and 8ths. So I need to think about what is a common multiple of these numbers. So if I have like 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, I'm writing out the multiples of 4. And then 8, 16, 24, and on the multiples of 8. We want to find the smallest thing that is in both lists of multiples. So notice 8 is in both lists, so that's the one we want to use. That's why they have 8 already written here. So these fractions don't need to change because they already have 8 as the denominator. But for 10/4, I need to think, okay, if I have 10/4 and I want it to have a denominator of 8, that's the weirdest 8 I've ever written. Better. How can I make that happen? What can I multiply by? Remember, we did this back in December before winter break. I can think, oh, times 2 and times 2. So 10/4 is equal to 20/8. So we can already tell, oh, this one is going to be bigger than this one because 20/8 is more than 19/8. If the pieces are different size, like one's 4ths and one's 8ths, it's harder to compare them. That's why we want to make them have the same denominator. All right. So, yep, multiply the numerator and the denominator just like we got. Now, again, we want them all to either be improper or mixed numbers because it's hard to compare if they're not. So since we already have 2 improper, if we make this improper, 2 times 8 is 16 plus 1 is 17. So we have 17/8. So then we can easily say, this one's the smallest, then that one is the biggest. Right? That's why we practiced improper fraction and mixed numbers in the last lesson. So, like we saw, we're ordering them. All right, now I do want to show you a different strategy you could use. I'm going to do a different type of problem. That's just, putting them in order. To do it, so there are some different numbers. So the first strategy was find a common denominator, and I'll do some more examples of that. The second strategy is to draw a picture. I wanted to put that one on the list because if all else fails and you don't know what to do, draw a picture and see if you can tell which one's bigger. Now, sometimes it's hard because you might have something like 3/20, and that's a lot of drawing. Or if you're not exact about it, it's hard to tell which one's bigger, but it's better than randomly guessing if you're really not sure what else to do. The third strategy is change them into decimals. So make sure you get that written down. Change them into decimals, and I'll show you how to do that. Now, not all fractions easily go into decimals. Oops, not fractions. But some do, and I find that can be a really helpful way to compare fractions when I'm struggling to know which one's bigger. Okay, so say I have 2/5. How would I write that as a decimal? Well, we always want our denominator to be 10, 100, 1,000, something like that, because those are our places for our decimals. So if I change it into tenths, I just say times 2 and times 2. Well, 2/5 equals 4/10. And I know in my decimals that this is the tenths place, so I know it's like 4/10. Okay. I also could say, if I want to change it to hundredths, I could multiply by 20 instead. Get 40 hundredths, equivalent decimal, 40 hundredths. Now, say I was comparing it to 1/4. I could say, okay, I want to make this out of 100. I better multiply by 25, because I know 4 times 25 is 100. I know that that's going to be 25 hundredths. So I can see, oh, 2/5 is bigger than 1/4 because 40 hundredths is bigger than 25 hundredths. So that's when I can do some comparing with fractions by changing them into decimals. Say I had something like 3/10 is already in tenths. So again, think about how I say it. Oh, 3/10, 3/10. And then I could include that in the mix and say, oh, it's actually right in between those two. Let me do some more examples with changing or finding a common denominator, because I think that is going to be the most reliable strategy, because I don't have to worry if the fraction changes into a decimal really easily. Like 1/3 does not change into a nice decimal. 5/12 does not change into a nice decimal. It's like 10, 100, 1,000. So finding a common denominator is going to be helpful. So if I think, okay, 1/3, well, let's look at denominators, 3 and 12. Let's think about the multiples of those. 3, 6, 9, 12. Oh, I hit 12. If one of them is a multiple of the other one, I should just use like the multiple as my denominator. So now I just need to change 1/3 into some amount of 12ths and think, okay, what do I multiply by? 4 times 4. So I get 4/12. So then I know, oh, 4/12 is less than 5/12 because they're the same size pieces. So I know it would be smaller. If you're not sure what to multiply by, if you write out, 3, 6, 9, 12. If you write out the multiples and say, oh, it's the 4th one, that means I need to multiply by 4. All right, 3 and 4/5 as compared to 1 and 2/3. With this, all we have to do is compare the whole numbers. Because if I have 3, that's going to be bigger than 1, no matter what the fractions are. So don't forget to look at the whole numbers, and sometimes you can just compare those. Now, we have 10/6, 3/8, and 12/6. So I'm going to go ahead and write this over here, because I think it's easier if I have more space. 10/6, 3/8, and 12/6. So I'm going to go ahead, write out the multiples of the denominators till I can find one that's the same. And you might know as you go, like, oh, I already know what I'm going to choose. But if you don't, that's okay. You can also look in your chart. Oh, look, 24 and 24. 24 is a multiple of both of them, so that's what I'm going to use. 24, 24, and 24. Now I can think, okay, what did I multiply 6 by to get to 24? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can multiply the top by 4. and get 40. 1, 2, 3. I multiplied by 3. So I'll get 9. And then times 4, so 48 24ths. So now all the pieces are the same size. They're all in proper fractions, so I don't have to do any converting. I can say, okay, this one's least, this one's middle, and this one's biggest. Or if they ask greatest to least, this one, then this one. Okay? Hopefully you're starting to see, oh, that's how I find a common denominator. Again, 6, not nice decimals. If it was something like 3/20 compared to 7/25, I could change them into decimals. I could say, okay, this one I can do times 5 and times 5 to get 15/100, which I know is going to be 15/100. This one's sort of similar to finding a common denominator. It just so happens that the common denominator is 100. 28/100. So I know that's 28/100. So I can see, oh, that one's going to be bigger. All right. If you need more examples, if you need more help, make sure you ask. Okay. I know that was real fast, and some of you might still need some more examples. But just remember, write out the multiples till you find one that's the same. Then you can rewrite each fraction and then compare them more easily. Okay? Good luck.